We are live. Welcome to my video. This is going to be my thoughts on The Walking Dead Season 3, Episode 10, Home. The episode is rated TVMA, so will this video be. And like all other videos I've done on this show, absolutely loved this episode. And there will be spoilers for it and all the ones leading up to it. Let's dive right in. So, yeah, so many things to talk about. Yeah, I appreciate, Rick continuing to struggle. He keeps seeing Lori and, yeah, Sarah Wayne Callies. It's amazing how much she can convey with so little motion. Like, at one point, as Rick is approaching her, she's barely moving at all, which, like, try it yourself. It's actually more difficult than you might think. Like, unless you have, like, training for, like, I know models obviously train for that sort of thing. It's not easy. The human body likes to be in some sort of motion, And also just really glad that she is still on the show. And, yeah, Michonne witnessing him just abandoning his post, and yeah, like everyone at this point, every member of his team realize they can't really depend entirely on him anymore. That's part of why Glenn is trying to take over the leadership position. Despite Herschel points out he might have limited leader snip-snills. If you want tact, find a tactician, And let's see, right, I also quite appreciated Herschel knowing, yeah, like, love the character, clearly a good guy, a good person. I don't think he would be quite a good leader for this sort of situation. Yeah, I appreciate, let's see, what was her name again? Beth, still very innocent, talking about, like, why are we so sure that, the governor is even coming here, and, this, yeah. And, yeah, the realization that, yeah, Tyrese and the others, the hole in the wall gang came through a hole in the wall. So how do they stop those, those walkers from getting in? How do they get to a point where that's not a huge problem? And then by the end of the episode, the prison, the outside of the prison is full of walkers, and the gates, are open, which, normally I would chide Rick for being a gatekeeper, but in this particular case, I do think it makes a lot of sense. Let's see. I would watch an entire spinoff purely dedicated to Carol, bringing out the heart and soul in hardened men. That just, yeah. I love her little chuckles and smiles. Yeah. Axel opening up to, and admitting, okay, technically he's not there for pharmaceuticals, but he didn't want to come across as a violent criminal. It was a toy gun, and he didn't even take it out of his pants, but they found his brother's gun. And the thing with, my brother had money problems. What kind? Wouldn't lend me any. And then the guy gets shot, and there's, like, blood splattering on Carol. I was just starting to like that guy. And then she has to use him as a, yeah, still human, because he was shot in the head, so he's not turning into a walker, shield. Holy crap, that was just, yeah, the action scene, the attack on the prison was, like, I think it might actually top the attack on Woodbury, so, yeah, the governor did really manage to, yeah, respond in kind. And let's see, yeah, such great tactics during that entire bit. You know, pinning them down, then ramming the gates, unleashing a bunch of walkers, and we already know, you know, we've seen them able to capture walkers and lock them up and such. And the person driving was wearing, like, suit covering the entire, just in case one of the walkers, and also because that person is the one that gets the very closest to the, yeah, the, should I be calling them inmates? They are technically in a prison all the time. Yeah, Rick's inmates. Yeah, you know, and very, very like almost runs over Michonne and then shoots, and thankfully doesn't, you know, do too much. Yeah, Rick's group didn't take too many hits. I really appreciate that it wasn't Carl's handgun that took out the guy in the tower, because I'm sorry, and I do really appreciate that the show is so realistic about stuff like the guns. There's no way he's gonna be able to score an accurate hit at that range with a handgun. But yeah, it was one of the assault rifles that got the job done. And let's see, the okay, so there's some Woodbury stuff, and then some Digson Brothers stuff. I think I'm done with the prison. Right, it was also very sweet, the sisters bonding over feeding Judith. And let's see, the yeah, you know, Glenn and Maggie, and this thing of, you know, he doesn't properly communicate, and he's kind of focusing on his own pain rather than hers, you know, in response to the assault on her by the governor. So yeah, she's really frustrated with him, understandably, fairly. I think that might cover the prison almost as well as the governor did. Yeah. So yeah, the Dixons, or Daryl Dixon and Merle Dick. Yeah, some really great stuff. They really do feel like brothers. Like, if I didn't already know they're not related, you know, before watching that scene, I'd be like, oh wow, they really did cast brothers, huh? Yeah, you know, Daryl makes a good point. You know, at the prison, they'd at least have a pot to piss in. Meanwhile, Merle is like, the trees are perfectly fine for that. And yeah, the way that Merle, like, you know, badgers Daryl, it feels like a very realistic dynamic. And, you know, finally Merle does realize, as, you know, that's part of why Daryl, yeah, I don't think we've ever seen him with his back uncovered. And, you know, an argument could be made, well, you know, it is like there's walkers about. Yeah, we've seen other characters with their shirts off, though, and it's hot down there. You know, I haven't spent a huge amount of time in the in the southern states of America, but it was enough to know it gets real hot there. So yeah, it was to cover the scars. And, you know, we have that thing about, you know, he beat both of us, that's why you left. And Morel explains why, you know, what would have happened. I am not going to repeat the words, but yeah, you know, that again feels very realistic. And there are a lot of, you know, some stereotypes about Southerners are absolutely accurate. There is a lot of physical violence, you know, domestic abuse and such. I think, yeah, right. I really did appreciate the you know, them talking, and Merle pointing out, you know, if I go back there, you know, the yeah, it talks about Glenn and Michonne, and I like that Daryl corrects him and says he's Korean, just such a great, yeah. And the thing about, you cut off your own hand long before you were handcuffed on that roof. It is his own decisions that led him here. At this point, Merle, if he doesn't go with Daryl, is completely socially isolated, and he doesn't have anybody else to blame. He chose to side with the governor, someone who clearly chooses evil way too much of the time, when he could have, like, to the point where he, attacks Glenn and Maggie. He recognizes Glenn. He could have been like, trying to fix that relationship. I mean, obviously it would take something substantial, but yeah, he ended up sticking with the governor. Now he's betrayed by the governor, which, like, of course, because that's what dictators do when someone isn't useful anymore, And yeah, ultimately he does agree to go with Daryl directly to prison. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. And yeah, it was really such an excellent, because, like, I'm thinking, okay, I guess Rick is just done for now. And then, Arrow is just such a great, because, like, immediately we know, like, Daryl might as well, like, put, like, his headshot on, the tail of every Arrow. It's his signature. And yeah, Merle saving Rick's life, that is going to go some way to proving that he is, not who he was until recently, and also making himself useful, which right now, they're less likely to turn away any help they can get. Let's see, I think that does cover, right, great scene with the bridge as well, which, we find out was like Yellow Jacket Creek, which I guess means nobody's obeying the dress code, but whatever. Yeah, this thing about Daryl immediately jumps into action, and, maybe it is in part because of the baby. I do like Merle pointing out, oh, so if they didn't have a baby, you just let them die? Because that technically does follow from what Daryl just said, I don't think Daryl actually would have, but he is rationalizing, he's trying to kind of be a part of both worlds, be someone his brother can respect, but also, he has changed, We've seen that. We saw how, single-minded he was when we first met him. He's like, oh, Merle is gone, let me attack, someone, and immediately, as soon as I get the chance, head back for Merle. And yeah, by now he's risking everything to just, yeah. Merle makes perfectly clear what it would take for him to risk his life to save someone. That was a very colorful line. And yeah, Woodbury, I wasn't sure exactly how the governor was going to react to the speech that, Andrea gave. Obviously, there was going to be some reaction, and yeah, he, still does not at all disappoint. He tells her that she should be the new leader, which, like, is gonna obviously make her go around, acting like she's practically the leader already. But he told everybody else, you gotta watch her, I don't know about her, and just, yeah. Goes up to Milton, who's in there, like, very heavily focused. I haven't been able to read shit. And, and he starts to explain, just so adorable, because, like, I don't think the governor gives a shit, dude. Like, here's your battery, And yeah, he, when he said, you've been very useful, I was like, past tense? Like, are you gonna shoot him or something? But, he does still have some use for him. So no. And let's see, everyone that Andrea encountered, Karen is also very distrustful. She's like, you're not the manager. And the thing with okay, Milton, can you give me a clear answer to a specific question? Where is the governor? Out on an errand? Milton, please never become a spy. You have no aptitude for it. And let's see. I think that does just about cover. I feel like there's something that I'm missing, but I can't quite place it. Right, I really appreciated the discussion about, are they going to, should they stay or should they go? Because the prison is, there's a giant bullseye on it now. And, Glenn makes a really solid point, The thing about, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Glenn, the thing about, we stayed we were on the road for months and we're fine. Yeah, back when Herschel had 2 legs and without a crying baby, it just, yeah. And that's especially now, now they 100% definitely have to make a decision. Like technically there are fences between the Rick's group and the walkers, but there's a lot of walkers. Whether if they stay, they're gonna be slim pickings for the governor. If the governor had brought even a few more people, he might have been able to take the prison. And I'm not 100% sure if this was like a warning or like like a message of don't fuck with me because I can make this I can be your best friend or your worst enemy. You seem to prefer the latter. And if it was that, or if he was really expecting to win there, I mean, it is one of those things where there's this saying about like a siege. Those who have the place that is being sieged, if they have enough supplies and the place is sufficiently fortified, they can they can stay there for an extremely long time. It's much, much harder to be the attacker, And yeah, I wouldn't rule out that he tried to flush them out, and it might work. And yeah, at that point, if the governor's men are waiting, just a little bit away from the prison, the moment that they start leaving the prison, they're probably going to be really, really easy to take out. So yeah, it's what's that saying? Caught between Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and a hard place.